What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another video. I'm just out here taking a walk because it is very, very beautiful out here. It's January, but outside is about 55. The sun's going down, and it's just nice to be out here. So here we are. In this video, I want to talk about React. React is a front-end framework. It's really popular nowadays. It's fast. It's easy to get used to. It's easy to implement. So I work part-time as a full-stack developer, and we use React for our front-end framework. All of our projects are written in React, so if you learn React once, you can then work on any of our projects, which is really, really nice. So I thought I'd make a video just about React components, how to write them, how to use them. So state is kind of something you also have to get used to in React. And state is used within components. So you could have a component show something different based on a state variable. So a state variable could be something like is open for a nav component. If this is open variable is false, you would render something. But if is open is true, then you would render something else. On the front end, it would look like I click on the nav and it opens. So the state variable changed based on that click. And then I click it again and it closes. So it toggles whenever I click it. So that's basically it. That's a really simple example, is just open and close. But it's not just that. You can kind of have as many state variables as you want in a component. It doesn't really matter how many you have. The more you have, the more complexity there will be. So if there's too much complexity, maybe you actually want to take some of that code and break it out into another component so that it's easier to manage, it's easier to write. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be using some state variables, and that's really easy to do in React, especially in the newest version. They really streamlined that process. So future me is going to go ahead and record that video, and then I'll see you guys back here.
Alright guys, so we're over here on the computer. Sorry if there's a little bit of background noise. I'm in my basement and our house is just making a lot of noise right now. And yes, it is also 1:37 a.m. I could not sleep, so I've decided to just do something productive. So in order to start building some React components, we're gonna need a React app. So Facebook created this Create React App tool, which you can use. So I'm not really gonna, walk through this because Facebook has their own instructions here, and it's actually just these 3 commands which you'll need to run in order to create a app. So I'll put this in the link in the description so you guys can go and check that out and use it. Whenever I'm starting a new React app, this is how I do it because it is so easy, and it basically creates everything that you need for a React app. I've opened up a new folder here in Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to use this Create React App to basically just quickly create a starter app. I'm just going to go ahead and do that here real quick. Alright, so once that finishes, it'll give you some messages in your terminal. You now have these 4 commands, and the one we're going to use here is yarn start. We're going to say yarn start, and what that'll do is start up our React development server. Alright, so here it is, open in our browser. Basically just has this simple React boilerplate view here, and that is located in source and then in app.js. So this is what your React looks like. It's basically a function called something. In this case, it's called app, and it's uppercase, and then you have basically a return statement that returns some HTML markup. So what we're going to do is basically make a new component, and we will call this home.js. So what we're just going to do is just copy this app.js file and just paste it into home. We don't want any of this other stuff because we want to make a new component inside of this. And you can see that these 2 things aren't being used here, so we can also delete these 2 lines. So it's really these 9 lines here that you'll need, and then we can start typing in our React code. So I'm just going to do a div, and then we can say welcome home. And then lastly, what we need to do is, since this is no longer called app, and we can call it home, and call this home as well. So basically what this does is it declares a function that just returns some markup, and then you export that function. Okay, so we can save that. Now if we want to use this in app, import home with a capital H from, and then specify a file path. So we need to specify this file path here. So it is at ./home.js. And then you can see down here, home is defined but never used. So let's actually go ahead and use it. I don't actually want any of this. So what I'm going to do is just delete it. And then if we want to use this home component, all we need to do is use it in brackets like that. And if we go back to our thing, it says welcome home. Now, the reason we use components is that now we can just basically use like 10 of these things and it'll say welcome home 10 times. So we don't have to write this piece 10 times. We can just simply use our component 10 times. Now let's say you want to pass some properties into a component. So let's create another component. I'm just going to copy this one and let's call this one greeting.js, and we can paste it in here and then we can change this to greeting. So now we have our greeting component. So in this greeting component, we basically want to say something like hello and then use a variable called something like name. What we need to do is specify that this component is going to receive other properties. We can do that by just saying props right here. And then in our markup, we can say props.name. So now if we go back to app, we can copy this line and we can import greeting from greeting.js right here. And then we can use greeting, but now this time we can pass in some properties. So we can say name, because that's what our property here is. It's props.name. You can say name equals Keanu Reeves, because why not, you know? And then it says, hello, Keanu Reeves. And then we can say cup of Joe. And then that one will say, hello, cup of Joe. I hope you're beginning to see now the advantages of using components. This component doesn't care what name is. It just uses name. And now you can use greeting as many times as you want, and it really doesn't matter what you pass in here, it will just work. I also want to show you a kind of component where you can basically wrap another component within it. So let's make another component just called title.js. Change this to title, spell it right. Once again, we're going to specify that this component will receive properties. This time we're just going to say props.children. Now, props.children means that this will render whatever is inside of this component. So you would use it like this. So first let's import it, title, and then now we can say title, but instead of closing it right away like this, now we can say some other markup inside of it. So we can say this is a titled element. Now what that does is not a whole lot yet. It just returns whatever we passed into it. But if we go back to here, we can now say this is an H1. This is a title. So now this piece here is one component. And if you open up your developer tools and inspect it, you can see that this div here is our title element. We can just move these other three components inside of it. And this title component, once again, doesn't care what's passed into it. It just says, okay, I'm gonna wrap whatever's passed in here in a div tag, and then also add a h1 tag before everything else. So that looks like this. And we can take this a step further by just saying text equals title1. And then in our title component, we can say props.text, and it looks like this. Let's say we don't want to use title in this app component. We actually want to use it in home. So let's import title into our home component and then use title here. This is why people really like React, because you can just build a bunch of components and then use them anywhere. And if a component is built well, it will work anywhere. Now, there is one last thing which I want to talk about, and that is state within components. So what I'm going to do is create this toggle component, and basically we are going to call this toggle. And then before this return statement, we are going to add some JavaScript. And we are going to say const is active, and then set is active equals react dot use state, and then we can pass in a default value, false. Is active is our state variable, and set is active is the function we can use to change this state variable. So it uses React state here. And then here we can pass in a default value. In this case, we're using false. So now we can say, we can create like a div, and we can say, because this is React, which is just a JS file, we can use JavaScript inside our HTML. And then I'm just going to use a JavaScript ternary function, so that looks like this. So this basically says, if isActive is true, display on, or if it's false, display off. We need a way to change this variable so we can see it toggle between these two values. So I'm going to say button. I'm just going to say toggle inside of it. This button will have a on click. We will pass a simplified arrow function that just says set is active, and then pass in the new variable for this. So we are just going to say the opposite of is active. If you click this once, it'll set it to true, and if you click it again, it'll set it to false. And now let's use that in app. So we can say toggle, and then we can use that right here. So that should show up right here. Here, let me actually just comment out these. So here we go. It's our off, because that's what we passed by default. So is active is not true, so it is displaying off. Now if we click it, it'll turn on and off, and on and off. So this is basically updating this is active state every time we hit. Now we don't really have to use only true and false. We can make, and this will be the last one, so let's just make a counter. So this will just be a component where you click a button and each time it will increment a number. So we can say, so our state variable will be count, and our setter will be set count, and then react.useState, and the default value will just be 0. Instead of a true or false statement, we can just say count, and then on click we can say set count plus 1. So now we need to use this counter here. I'm going to comment out this toggle component here and use count, and I'll update my function name to counter, and I will update this to just say plus 1. All we need to do now is just say counter. All right, so we have our button that's just plus 1, and it's 0, and if we hit this, it should increment by 1. We have another one, and we can just keep going, right? We can just make a whole nother button that just basically is the opposite. So we can say on click set count -1, and then the button will say -1. And so now you can go down and you can go up. Okay, so I hope that was useful for you guys. We kind of messed around with some components here and created some cool stuff. I hope it was informative, and I hope you will go forward and just make a bunch of weird components and have fun with React. So once again, as always, if you have any questions about components or React or about me or anything like that, throw them in the comments below and I will get back to you. Alright, so I hope that was useful for you guys. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to subscribe for more, that is also down below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.